As we get farther away from Bill Belichick's last day with the Patriots, we are getting to read more about how the legendary coach went from six-time Super Bowl champ with the Patriots to unemployed. ESPN detailing Bill Belichick's failed job hunt in a lengthy report released today. Did Bill get a bad reference from his former employer? Well, here's an excerpt from inside Bill Belichick's failed off-season job hunt, courtesy of ESPN. Quote, but in a conversation with blank, Kraft delivered a stark assessment of Belichick's character, according to a source who spoke with two people, a close Kraft friend and a longtime Belichick confidant. The source quoted the Belichick source as saying, quote, Robert called Arthur to warn him not to trust Bill. Well, Robert Kraft's year-long smear campaign isn't a good look, but it is not why Bill Belichick has failed to land a job as a head coach. Bill is the reason. Hello and welcome to Arbella Early Edition. I am Trenni Casey. It is easy to cherry-pick all the Robert Kraft nuggets from the ESPN article on why Bill isn't coaching, but it would also lead you to a false narrative. ESPN's reporters ran through every team with an actual opening or a team that was actually willing to move on just to bring in Bill Belichick. Those teams, Philadelphia, Dallas, Washington, Carolina, Chargers, Vegas, Tennessee. All of those teams, with the exception of the Chargers, either reached out to Bill Belichick about working for them or had discussions about interviewing him. All declined to bring him in. A source with one of the teams with an opening told ESPN this. Belichick is, quote, ability to build a culture at this stage is an issue. He was so stubborn with the offense. He ran that offense down to a pulp. Mac Jones looked like a capable quarterback early. You think Joe Judge and Matt Patricia can run the offense for him? It's arrogance. The article says that this was echoed with what reporters heard from others. And when it came down to the Falcons' final decision, sure, the Kraft comments to Arthur Blank, I'm sure, didn't help, but it doesn't appear to be the reason for their decision. A source telling ESPN they viewed Belichick as, quote, an older, stoic coach who'd blown up the building and wouldn't likely stay beyond 2 years if he sets the wins record. They also cited Belichick's lack of ability to develop young players and coaches and the Patriots' recent struggles. Belichick loved to cite his track record as a reason to trust him. But these teams knew that was in the past. What Belichick did in his post-Brady era, well, it wasn't good enough. Just like the Patriots, he left behind. All right, a lot to dig into there. Trying to get that all in like 2 minutes, and I'm not sure I did a great job. No, thanks, Andy. Thanks.
True pro.
Andy Hart from WEEI, Phil Perry, our Patriots insider. I mean, when you read this, Phil, what was your reaction to this article? I mean, we've seen these sort of, we'll call them wicker bombs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what's interesting to me is that it does paint it as somewhat of a surprise that Robert Kraft might have given an honest assessment as to what his relationship was like with his head coach, when we all know how it has gone over the course of the last few years. It has been no secret, thanks to Seth Wickersham, Don Van Natta, and Robert Kraft himself. He's in a documentary calling his head coach a pain in the tush. Like, it is no secret to anyone how things ended here in New England. So what do you expect him to say on the phone call? We should acknowledge Stacey James is on the record from the Patriots saying he advocated for Bill Belichick to get this job. He didn't talk about him in the terms that they're describing in the story. But Andy, aren't you supposed to be honest with the guy that you have a relationship for a long time, and he asks you for a reference on a guy when your relationship has been very public and how it broke has been very public? What are you supposed to say? You wouldn't believe how funny he is behind the scenes, Arthur. He's a joy to be around. Like, that, to me, is unrealistic. So I think he could have done both. Hey, this guy's a really smart football mind. Your roster is pretty good. You're probably going to win more games with Bill Belichick than you've won in a while. Is it going to be tough? Is he not going to tell you much about what's happening behind the scenes with your football team? Probably. But that's just sort of how it goes with him. And I don't think that is necessarily slandering the guy.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily slandering either. I think the issue that Robert has here is the sort of wanting it all ways. And we've talked about that in various ways this offseason. But so we had a press conference in January where he talked about the amicable breakup and that Bill deserved the right to not be traded, but to, figure out what he's going to do. And in that press conference, I thought Robert set a tone and made it clear he expected Bill to coach this year, talking about wearing a different logo on a cutoff hoodie. And so you have that sort of tone of Robert compared to he's making phone calls. Now, I will say one thing, Phil, the difference is, did he answer a call or did he make a call? And I do think there's a difference there. If you call blank and say, by the way, I don't know if you can trust this guy, which isn't necessarily new information because I believe we all watched a Dynasty where Robert Kraft said after the Eagles Super Bowl, I had reason to doubt whether he was making decisions in the best interest of the football team. That's a lack of trustworthiness. But I agree with Phil on the one side of if blank calls me and the article states that blank believes Kraft is his best friend in the NFL among owners and says, so what's the deal with Bill really? We know his record, we know all the decisions we see from afar, but what's the deal? I'm going to answer it honestly, as a friend, right? As a confidant. I think Robert Kraft, kind of like Bill Belichick, focuses on loyalty and trust and having a circle of people, like Bill Belichick says, the dependables. So Robert answers that phone call and he's honest. That's one thing. The issue is here, it looks a little gladiator-esque because in the middle of everything, he was smiling with Bill Belichick and saying he deserves to go on and figure out what he's going to, and he's kind of got the gladiator behind him with the jabbing him in the back and snapping it off.
Shaking his hand in the front and stabbing him in the back while he's doing it. I think what is interesting, guys, is that, like, I think people who are close to the situation and followed the Patriots to sort of, I don't want to say downfall, but downward trajectory the last couple of years, look at this article and go, well, yeah, a lot of teams weren't interested in him. All you had to do was look at his track record. But if you read the headlines from a lot of the papers or on, social media, they all point the finger at Robert Kraft. But Arthur Blank publicly spoke respectfully about Bill Belichick afterwards. But here's another excerpt from ESPN's article and what kind of went on behind the scenes. It wrote, what Blank didn't say was that he and his top lieutenants had voted on the team's next head coach, ranking each candidate. Bill Belichick didn't even finish in anyone's top 3. Now, I have to imagine that whatever Robert Kraft told Arthur Blank in confidence was then probably relayed to the committee that was deciding who would be the next head coach. But, even if somebody's difficult to work with, if you really want to win, there's no one better, or it seems at least on the surface that there's no one better, Andy, than Bill Belichick. But it seems to me like the people in Atlanta didn't feel like he might be their best opportunity to win. Yeah, and on a great radio station in town called WEEI, Jeremy Fowler just said he doesn't believe Bill would have gotten the job had Robert said nothing. He doesn't believe it would have, because the straw poll you just referenced and the hierarchy in Atlanta was into the young coaches, into the other guys for whatever their criteria was, whether that's job security, right? Self-preservation, not wanting to lose power when Bill gets there, whatever. So they were kind of stacking the deck against Bill. And then you have Blank with this in the back of his mind, because I didn't think the story was actually clear, Phil, whether Blank shared it with his executives, whether he passed down the knowledge that Robert had given him. But you have all his executives voting against Bill, and then you have his best buddy in the NFL who's been with the guy for a quarter of a century saying, I don't know if you can trust him. That made the decision pretty simple. He may not have had to pass that information from Robert Kraft to the others, because it sounds like after one meeting, the others had decided this wasn't going to work for us, and they had a second interview as a common courtesy to the greatest head coach of all time. That, to me, is the bigger issue here, Trenni, to hit on your point off the top of the show, and I agree with you. I don't think whatever Robert Kraft had to say was the influencing factor for Arthur Blank. I think it's the 2, 3, 4, however many people are between the head coach and the owner in Atlanta, and there are a lot of them between the general manager and the team president, and I think they have a chair of the board there as well. It's a crowd. They care about their employment. They might care about winning, but they care about their own jobs. And if you bring in Bill Belichick, no matter what he says, and it sounds like he was saying all the right things in terms of his willingness to work with others, if you feel like there's a chance the hierarchy gets blown up, quote unquote, with Bill Belichick involved, you're not going to want that guy around. Well, and especially if one of the points that was made was that he's only going to stick around for a couple of years and then you're starting from scratch again. And that's where I think there's a lot of salacious quotes and sources and details here. But to me, those are the two biggest factors. He looks like, because this story basically painted the picture that everybody feels like Bill's getting 15 wins and he's getting the hell out right afterwards, right? He's focused on that. And the other issue here is, it says it late in the story. I think this is a bigger, if he was 63, it would be a different story. Yep. He's 72 years old. So he's an aging coach who has some struggles, but I think those struggles might be overlooked if he had another decade left in him, like, oh, he'll figure it out. He's Bill Belichick. But I'm getting 2 years of Bill Belichick, who's 72, and he's going to change the entire power structure. And they cited the Eagles as an example of, that's a bridge too far. That's too much to disrupt, and there's no guarantee it's going to lead to success.